Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Discovery, How to Learn About Your Donors' Assets. My name is Jeremy Stelter. I'm the Executive Vice President here at the Stelter Company, and I'm happy to be here today to introduce our presenter, Cathy Sheffield. Before I do, I'd like to say a few words about our webinar series. As an industry leader in plan giving marketing, Stelter is committed to providing innovative solutions and education for our industry. We're happy to host this complimentary webinar today, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the year. Today's webinar is the sixth of our 2019 curriculum. Our final topics and presenters slated for this year are Michael Degenhart with tips for integrating plan giving into campaigns, and Jay Steenhausen teaching us how to build strong partnerships between planned and major gift officers. You can register for these webinars by visiting our website at stelter.com/webinars, and we'll be sending invites straight to your inbox as the webinars draw closer. Back to our presentation today with Cathy Sheffield. Cathy is a fundraising executive with 25 years experience specializing in major gifts and gift planning and healthcare and higher education. She is the founder and president of Think Giving, a boutique plan giving consulting firm based in Fort Worth, Texas. Cathy is also a vice president with Thompson & Associates, a value-based estate planning firm based in Nashville, Tennessee. Cathy is past chair of the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners and served as the 2015 chair of the National Conference of Philanthropic Planning. She serves as a member of the American Council on Charitable Gift Annuities Board of Directors and is a member of the Rollover Rangers, formerly named the Charitable IRA Initiative. Cathy is a member of the faculty for the American Institute for Philanthropic Studies, which administers the Certified Specialist in Plan Giving Designation Program. In 2015, Cathy was honored by the Fort Worth Metro chapter of AFP with the Ben Franklin Award for the Outstanding Professional Fundraising Executive. Cathy received her MBA from TCU, Texas Christian University, and Bachelor of Science from North Dakota State University and is a proud Bison. She is a certified fundraising executive, chartered advisor in philanthropy, certified specialist in plan giving, and a fellow in charitable estate planning. We are really, really fortunate and honored to have Cathy with us today. She's a dear friend, a great person, and a really entertaining presenter that I think you all will enjoy. Thank you so much, Cathy.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate you so much. And it's such an honor to be here today and to be able to share this webinar with you. My hope is that after this webinar that everyone will feel a little bit more comfortable asking their donors and prospects discovery questions, and that the process leads to better gifts, not only for your organization, but for your donors as well. So today we will explore the soft skills that I think and many think are truly needed in order to get to know your prospects much better. And one of the things that I'm often asked is how to introduce the consideration of a planned gift to a donor. And while doing so, how do you explore their gift options? So I'm hoping today that this will be helpful as we review the approach to the discovery process through questions, and that afterwards you have a set of questions that can be used to really get to know them and their assets. And then finally, we'll talk about how to secure opportunities to continue the conversation, which we all know is ultimately the goal in our development process. So the people that we work with have a connection to our mission. They have a strong interest or affinity in your organization, and we've identified them as someone with the ability to give, whether that is now or in the future. So let me give you some examples. We may look at our top donor lists, our volunteers, our organizational leadership, our current and former board members, current and former employees and staff, our donor advisors. Often I think we forget about donor advisors, but many of them become passionate about your organization through their clients. And then, of course, our grateful mission beneficiaries. So this just kind of gives you an idea of who we should be targeting these conversations with. So let's explore some of the various types of solicitations. Those of us in the fundraising profession refer to three primary types of giving: annual, major, and planned. These are what I consider internal terms that help us segment our supporters and identify them for certain campaigns, fundraising campaigns. However, the reality is that our donors do not think of their gift giving in these terms at all. When they make a gift to our organizations, they're doing so because they like or love your organization and your mission. I have categorized, for the purposes of today, the types of solicitations as transactional, stop and think giving, and then transformational giving, which we typically think of as our major and our planned gifts. Jeremy mentioned that I'm also with Thompson and Associates, and Eddie Thompson uses the phrases habitual giving for annual giving, emotional giving for major gifts, and strategic giving for planned giving. And I've also heard them discussed in terms of dating or relationships, so the crush, going steady, and marriage. So we're going to be focusing today on the stop and think emotional and transformational strategic giving. But I think in terms of when we're speaking with our donors, we need to be sure that we're not talking to them in those terms. When our donors think about making a major or a planned gift to our organization, they may be asking themselves questions like, what is my financial position? Am I able to make this gift now or in the future? And if it's a planned gift, do I have enough money or resources to live on for the rest of my life, my spouse's life? That may be one of the first things that they think about. And if I make a gift, will I have enough money to leave to my heirs? If I make this gift, will it negatively impact what I plan to leave to my heirs? How much do I want to leave to them, and am I able to give outside of that number? And then lastly, they often ask themselves, do I want to consider making a gift to charity via my estate? If there is a surplus, would I rather make that gift to charity, or would I rather make that gift to the IRS? I had a donor once tell me that if you leave the she and he out of the word heirs, you're left with only the IRS. So it's something that I think many folks think about, and when they realize that there is opportunity to leave out the IRS, then they are happy to consider those options. So legacy and wealth transfer conversations, how do we ease into those? And I think that it's much easier than we think it is. Research shows that the high net worth donors are increasingly seeking advice, typically from their family members, their donor advisors, charities, friends, when it comes to transferring their wealth and looking at that estate planning process. That same research tells us that those families are having more open conversation and communication about their wealth and their values and what their hopes are for their heirs. And as development officers, we need to reframe that inside technical term again, planned giving conversation into a legacy or a wealth transfer conversation. And I think that often will assist in setting the stage for having some of those conversations. So how do we do this? Well, in all honesty, it's not as hard as we think it might be. It's essentially all about the questions, and people love to talk about themselves. They crave to be understood and known, and it's literally a basic human need. If you think back to your college sociology class, you may remember that one of our basic human needs is to be understood and known. Our follow-up questions are going to demonstrate to them that we're truly listening, and listening demonstrates that we care about the conversation that we're having with them and that we care about them. Asking questions about motivation will reveal their true values, what they possess as a value, and will help them come to their own conclusion. And I will tell you that the questions, and I say almost always better than prospect research, but I can guarantee you they're much better than prospect research. I don't want to offend our professional prospect researchers in the audience by saying that it's always, but so I will say it almost always. But I think that we all would agree that having a conversation face-to-face with an individual is going to bring us much more facts versus what we get through our research. And seeking to understand our donors' why and what will equal and happy donors and much better gifts every single time. So I will say it again, it's all about the questions. So how do we approach discovery? We've heard this adage before that during most of our conversations, we need to talk 25%, listen 75%. And there's a wonderful expression, and I know my husband is a huge Judge Judy fan, so he says this a lot, and she says this a lot too. There's a wonderful expression that if you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and it's best to use them in that proportion. And yet we often find ourselves speaking more than we listen. And I think that's a symptom of a bigger problem, and that is that we assume we already know what we're seeking to find out. And so we really need to focus on listening the majority of the time when we're sitting in a discovery conversation. When we don't, we're actually missing out on one of the essence of relationships, which is growth. And that's vital, that we always approach every single conversation with that in mind, that we're hoping to grow the relationship and deepen the relationship. And then it's always best, of course, to find a topic of interest to the donor. That's going to help you evolve that conversation and the relationship. So we're going to review some of the discovery soft skills that I have found to be very helpful in establishing, deepening, and continuing relationships with not only our prospects and our donors, but with everyone. And the first, of course, is to be positive and energetic and to smile a lot. And, you know, even they say that even when you're on the telephone, if you're smiling, you can hear that smile. So I think that smiling a lot during those conversations is helpful. Maintaining eye contact, expressing sincere and genuine interest in them. Kindness and graciousness goes far. So offering genuine compliments. We've all heard compliments in our past that have not been genuine, and we know the difference. It may just be a pleasantry that someone is trying to offer. They're not necessarily intending it to come across as ingenuine. They're maybe trying to develop a better relationship with you, but when it's not genuine, we definitely identify that. I suggest that we start small and build to larger topics. It's important that we make people feel good and comfortable about our relationships with them, and if we're immediately jumping from that crush to the marriage, obviously there'll be an issue with the relationship, whether it's in the fundraising world or if it's in the cultivation solicitation realm of our relationships. And then let the relationship evolve naturally in due time. We need to be socially aware, have a good radar of where our attention is. Is the attention on ourselves or the other person? So when we're working with an individual, we need to maintain the effort of having this be about partnering that individual or couple with the organization and your mission, and not about what the organization is going to achieve out of the relationship. So when you're looking through this list of soft skills, keep that in mind, that they're going to see through that fairly quickly. And so watch their body language, see how they're responding to you. Are we going too fast? Are we going too slow? You'll be able to know. And when I'm speaking about conversations and relationships, I'm not talking about this being one done meeting. And I've been asked that before too. I mean, can you make a big, huge legacy or major gift solicitation in your first meeting? My gut says no. But you will also find out from the individual that you're speaking with what they want their pace to be. So set the pace in a way that matches theirs. And we have to remember too that today, the way our industry works, there are so many ways to communicate with our donors, whether it's direct mail, website, email links. Our in-person persona, when we actually get to be in front of a donor, has to be enjoyable and comfortable for them to connect that same feeling with your organization. And so we need to remember how often they're being approached outside of just the visit that we're having with them. So let's talk about sensitive questions and what are some of those questions and how do you approach? So I think that the key to a successful question being asked is that before you dive in, you ask permission. So say something like, do you mind if I ask you a question? I'd love to know better and learn more about you and your interests. How did you become connected to our organization? How did you identify the causes that are most important to you? Why did you choose to support our cancer program? Do you mind if I asked if you or a loved one experienced cancer? Those types of questions will really help set that stage when you think that it might be sensitive, and particularly depending upon the nature of your organization, they may or may not want to directly share with you how the organization impacted them. But when you approach it the right way, you can get to that a little bit easier. So what questions do we think would be considered off-limit questions? I say avoid questions that have yes and no answers. We definitely want them to be open-ended. I think that that's fairly basic in our industry to say we want open-ended questions. Don't ask questions that you or the organization already knows. Again, it needs to be a relatively natural evolution of the relationship. Even if you've never met this person, but you know their family founded the nonprofit for which you work, we don't need to ask them how they became interested in your organization or the mission. That should be fairly obvious to us. If a lot of the information that is in your CRM is stuff that is readily available to the community or should be readily available to anyone that works for your organization, don't ask that question. They will see right through that and it will make them uncomfortable. I suggest that we avoid religion, politics, and sex, unless, of course, it directly relates to your organization. So if you are a religious organization, obviously that's going to be open for you to talk about. If you are a political organization or an organization that deals with sexuality, gender-specific areas, things like that, obviously you can use your gut and know whether or not the question is appropriate or not. And then I suggest that the questions that are asked, that they need to be related to your mission and related to deepening your relationship with them as a representative of that organization. If you get stuck, remember the acronym HELP. My friend Melanie Norton had a wonderful friend, actually I think it was a donor named Mary Alice, and Mary Alice gave a tidbit to Melanie that Melanie shared with me, which is HELP, hobbies, entertainment, literature, and pets. That those are always good areas that will help you get to know the donor, their values, what their interests are through their hobbies. Literature will help you understand a little bit more about what they value in life. And then, of course, pets always get people talking. Children, similar. But you just can get so much out of a person when you ask them questions related to these areas. So I read a book that helped me probably 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, called The 7 Faces of Philanthropy. And reading this book, it's probably dated. I don't even know what year this book was written, but it was written by Prince and File, and it may or may not need to be redone. That's not a necessarily suggestion for them. However, it was really helpful to me when it came to identifying how well I know my donors. And I will tell you that it taught me how to cultivate them based on a new understanding of donor motives, needs, and their expectations. And it also provided valuable insights into how to develop a strategic approach towards building long-term relationships with these donors. So the book outlines 7 different types of donors. The communitarian, which is someone who says that or feels that doing good makes good sense. The devout, which believes that doing good is God's will. The investor, which believes doing good is good business. The socialite, which feels that doing good is fun. The altruist, which believes that doing good feels right. The repayer, doing good in return for good that was done to them. And the Zionist, who believes doing good is a family tradition. I saw an amazing presentation a few years ago by a prospect researcher who likened these characteristics or these types of donors to the 7 characters on Gilligan's Island, which was awesome. It was a great way to remember them. So they were in the order that you see on the slide. It was the skipper, Marianne, Mr. Hal, Ginger, the professor, Gilligan, and Mrs. Hal were the characters that she felt identified that. So if that helps you in thinking in terms of how you identify your donors, it will help you with understanding what type of individual they are. So now, during this part of the webinar, I want to dive into some questions that I've gathered over the last 15 years from various sources, and I've identified the sources as I've put them on these slides, which have really helped me discover my donors. So the first category of questions that we're going to go through is helping to deepen the relationships. So I've listed some questions here that I'll let you review, and then I'm going to share with you some additional questions and some, hopefully some stories that will help you see how these might be able to be woven into some of your conversations with your donors. So in addition to the ones you see on the slide, who is someone that you admire or someone you consider a hero and why? And you can see how if you asked someone that question, you would be able to learn a lot more about them. If they mentioned a family member or someone in your community, then that helps you also identify maybe where some of their values have come from. How would you like to be involved with our nonprofit organization? And can you tell me about a time that a nonprofit asked you to be involved and that you really enjoyed it? Or can you tell me about a time in which they asked you to become involved and they did not enjoy it? Perhaps the nonprofit flubbed it. And I will tell you, I get real honest answers when I ask that question, particularly when they have flubbed it. So I think that, we all don't want to be in that category of an organization that has flubbed it with a donor. So when you ask them to do something, obviously we need to follow through with that, but they want to be valued in whatever it is that you're asking them to do. And we know that, we do know that. And then what is a question that you wish people asked you, or is there something that you wish people knew about you that isn't obvious? I think those are really good questions for us to develop deeper relationships with people. So now we can explore some questions on learning about their motivation, what motivates them to be philanthropic. Again, you'll see some questions listed on here. One of my favorites on this list is that if you had $1 million and you had to give it away, but not to family or friends, how would you give away the money? And I think that that tells you a lot too about the individual's motivations. There's some great questions on this slide. In addition to this question, I think it's good to ask them who else is involved in your decision to make a gift to a nonprofit. If they say to you that it's their wife or their husband or maybe their siblings or their children, then you have a much better idea of what is motivating them to identify certain charitable causes and missions to support. Which donations have triggered the most satisfaction in your life? Do you have any regrets over any charitable gifts that have been made? I actually had a situation where an advisor of a couple that I had worked with, their advisor shared with me that a donor was incredibly dissatisfied with an organization after they had made a 6-figure gift to that organization, and it had really, in my opinion, as a fundraising professional, little to do with what the organization had utilized the gift or how they had utilized the gift. It was done in the way they wanted it to be done, but it had a lot to do with how the organization communicated with them after. And so find out a little bit more by asking additional questions once you find that out. What are the critical results that you expect our organization to produce? And have we met your expectations with regards to this? Are we sharing our results with you appropriately? And again, that kind of goes back to what is their expectation. I like to ask under the motivation category, does the donor have a donor advised fund? If they do, then their motivation may be a little bit differently than some of your other donors with regards to at least the frequency of when they make their gifts or how they do their philanthropy with other organizations too. And I'll dive into that here in a second. Let's see. How do you want to see your, how do you want to see your gift in action? And I had this actually work very well with a donor that I've been working with in the last few months. She was a woman who had planned on making a testamentary bequest gift to the organization. And after that question, she really became thoughtful about it, and we discovered that there was a way for her to actually make the gift now while she's living, and that she can do that and enjoy the gift while she's living. And a lot of people really do enjoy seeing their gift fulfilled and watching the mission in action around that gift. And she's actually thanked me several times since and saying, you know, before we had that conversation, I had no idea that I could actually do this while I was living and see it in action. Ask them if they enjoy galas or special events. If that's the case, if they enjoy those, then you know a little bit about how to help motivate them, but then you also understand a little bit more about their philanthropy when you think in terms of what those gifts signify. And then another question I think is still pertinent for us to ask is regarding the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2018. Has that impacted the deductibility of their giving and how people are choosing to make their gifts now? Did that law change how they make their gifts? And I think that question is very important for us. It will also not only find out for us whether these individuals are having to reconsider how they give, it'll help us identify those individuals who might need a little help in understanding how bunching their gifts may benefit them or how a donor advised fund might benefit them. It will help with them in understanding pledges, in your organization in understanding pledges. If they choose to start bunching their gifts, how are you going to document that? It will also help you understand why they don't give in certain years. So I think that it's good questions to help identify those motivations. So let's review some questions around values. I think there's five good questions here on the slide that will help you, but I stumbled upon a really incredible question that I think I want to share with you today within that is on the footnote here, the Philanthropic Planning Companion, written by Robert Wallers and Brian Sagostano. He had a question in that book that I have used several times with donors. It's something along the lines of, 50 years from now, your great-grandchild is asked to write a history of your family. What does that story tell? What are the themes that carry through from now until that point in time when that child's doing that report? How does that great-grandchild know you, your guiding principles, and what you held most during your life? And people find that question very interesting, and they spend a lot of time reflecting on it. And I hope that it helps them about their lives, legacy that they want to leave. I think that you can ask questions along the lines of asking folks to tell them about events, experiences, or people that have helped shape them during their lifetime, and maybe asking them a question around what achievement in their life are they the most especially proud of. If it's a business achievement or a family achievement, a personal achievement, I think that it helps you quite a bit in identifying those values that are important to them. So now we're going to transfer into the conversation of their legacy and how they wish to transfer their wealth through their estate planning. So there's several questions on here that I think are really good for you, but additional one that I'd like to share with you is, do you feel your children are prepared to handle an inheritance? If you have a child that is perhaps going through a divorce, or is perhaps in a situation in which they may have an addiction like gambling, or otherwise that may cause harm if they received a significant inheritance, those types of questions I think really help folks realize the importance of thinking about their transfer and their legacy and how they wish to prepare their family and their loved ones for that act to happen. So I think that those are some good questions. Have you involved your kids in your wealth transfer decision? I think that if we are not encouraging our donors to have conversations with with their loved ones, their family, their children, their parents, their nieces, their nephews, if we are not encouraging them to have that conversation when we know that they are including us, the nonprofit, in their estate plans, we're doing them a disservice. It's important that their family be fully aware, because at this point in time they can still express what your organization meant to them and why they're choosing to do that. And it will be more accepted by those children through the process when it comes time to transfer those assets. So we've been talking a lot about questions to deepen a relationship or to identify their values and motivations. And we're going to segue into questions that are specific about assets and how to identify giftable assets. So before we do that, I just want to review the list of assets that can be explored during our conversations. You'll see them on here: investment portfolios, retirement accounts, commercial annuities, any real estate, primary or vacation, undeveloped real estate, any oil, gas, or mineral interests they might have, insurance policies, intellectual property collections. But what is missing off this list? Cash. And I don't list cash on here because that is one of the assets that we tend to go to immediately. That's our standby or our go-to asset, when statistics and research show us that that's typically the smallest held asset that our donors and our prospects have. So I left it off the list on purpose. Obviously, we have donors who will use cash and will continue to use cash. However, that may or may not be the best asset if they are charitably inclined and are in a position to explore their assets. It may or may not be the best asset, so I purposefully leave it off. So now let's dive into some questions around real estate. And I think that real estate is one of our largest held assets. When you look at the IRS and the IRS research around the assets that individuals own, retirement accounts and real estate tend to be in the two largest pieces of the pie. So feel free to ask your donors about where they like to travel, if you know they have a vacation home in Colorado, perhaps that will be in the future an asset that could be gifted to a nonprofit. Perhaps their children don't share the passion of skiing and may want a beach home. So you just never know whether or not that asset might potentially be a solution to a gifting problem later on. I have a donor that I've been working with whose husband passed away in the last year and a half, and she and her husband owned some property in a different state, and they would winter in that state for as many days as that state would allow them to before having to pay state income tax in that state. And during our conversations, I've learned that that is something that she is starting to reevaluate, whether or not she has the energy or the motivation to continue to manage it and to make sure that it's being taken care of, and does she still want to go down there and see that property and spend time down there. But I think that through our conversations, what's really important is that we just be sure that they understand that that real estate may be something that could be gifted later if they're inclined to make a gift to a charitable organization and they're looking for ways to fund that gift. So feel free to ask these questions. We can look at some questions that are around retirement assets. Again, thinking of it as probably the second largest category of wealth that an individual might have. And IRAs have been given a lot of attention lately because of the IRA charitable rollover. And so I think, one of the questions we definitely want to be asking our donors, if we don't know their age, but we think they're close to it, is are they familiar with the qualified charitable distributions that can be made from their retirement plan? We tend to call that an IRA rollover, but are they familiar with that can be used and not be considered taxable income from them? So what they're in essence doing is using their required minimum distribution up to $100,000 and transferring that directly to a charitable organization. And while they don't necessarily receive a charitable deduction for that, they are not having to claim it as taxable income, which is often what individuals in that age category are trying to achieve. So I encourage you to delve into that if you suspect or know that your donor is in that age category. In fact, my father, who's 73, makes quite a few charitable gifts every single year. And when I was with him last Christmas, I learned that he had fulfilled a pledge at his church with cash. And we immediately discussed the fact that he could use his RMD for that in exchange for the cash and receive some tax benefits from that. Another question that I like to ask in this category is, did they know that a charity could be named as a partial or sole beneficiary of the IRA, and that the charity will not pay income tax on it like a person would? And many times they don't realize that when an IRA or a retirement plan goes to an individual, that individual will be paying income tax on that. If they're having to choose between an IRA and a life insurance policy to benefit an individual, they're going to benefit greatly from looking at the life insurance, not the retirement plan for the human. Speaking of life insurance, let's look at life insurance. So I've got two questions on here that I think are relative to life insurance questions. And life insurance is one of many actually, vehicles that were never intended to be gifted to charity. However, they benefit charity a great deal and are something that we need to be looking to satisfy those individuals who are interested in making gifts. So the questions on here that I have are, now that your children are grown or that you are retired, do you have any life insurance policies that you no longer need? So many times parents will have term insurance policies that will expire when their children are of a certain age, but sometimes they do not. So you may just want to ask about that and find out whether or not they have any policies that they are no longer using or intend to use. So let's look at tangible personal property. And again, I think this is an asset that we don't think of as being valuable, even from our own perspective. When you think about the collections that you have at home, do you even realize how valuable they are? And so a question that you might be able to ask an individual is, you've built an amazing collection of Star Wars action figures. Do you or your children or grandchildren, do you think your children are going to share that interest when you transfer those down to them, when they receive that collection? And it could be other assets like coins and stamps. But anyway, either way, you get the drift, right? So they have a collection that is probably worth a great deal. If it was put on eBay or put up at an auction, they could make some decent money at that. But do they see their children enjoying those assets as much as they do while they have them, or would it better benefit them to make a gift to a charitable organization? I also have on here art. What a collection of art you have. Have you thought about what you would like to do with your art when you no longer wish to display it, or when you're no longer using it, which is my nice way of saying when you've passed away. But either way, many people have art that they sometimes just store. And depending upon your mission, they may or may not get the full tax deduction benefit of donating that art to you, but they can at least consider that as an option and something that they can look at. some questions to discover appreciated securities in stock. I have actually used these questions quite a bit when we receive those large cash gifts. So when you receive a 5 or even a 6 particularly, or even a 5-figure gift in your organization that's written on a check, have you thought about whether or not that donor could have utilized a different asset to satisfy that gift? And there have been several occasions where I've picked up the phone, called the donor, and said, hey, thank you so much for this gift of $100,000. I noticed that it's on your personal check. I know in the past you've made gifts using X, Y, or Z stock. Just wanted to see if that's still a possibility for you, or do you have any other stock options that might be appreciated at this time that could benefit you? I've had several people take me up on that offer. Please send that check back to me, or feel free to shred it, and I'll transfer over stock. I think that at least, again, part of our goal is to educate them on being able to maximize their giving, and we also still want to understand what they own. So asking that question helps you in both cases. And I think that anytime you help a donor maximize the benefits that they receive outside of just the joy and satisfaction that they have of making that gift to you, I think that it's a win-win for everyone involved. I have a few questions on here about discovering business interests. I will let you explore those. I think that these types of gifts are a little bit more rare than the other ones that we've discussed, but I think it's always good when you know that the donor is an entrepreneur or has a business that he's affiliated with or a partnership he's affiliated with, that you discuss with them exit strategies. You don't necessarily have to sit down and have the full discussion with them, but bring it to their attention that that's something they may want to start considering if they know, and you know, that their children are not interested in continuing in the family business. So what are some ways that we can pull this all together that will help you continue those conversations? And remembering that keeping front and foremost is, as one of the biggest goals for our donor, is their what and their why as we proceed to the how the goal can be accomplished. There is a woman that I worked with when I was working with an organization here in town who had some property that was located across the street from the organization. And she was really interested in looking at ways that she could give us the property. Her situation was she was single and needing to continue to live there. So I had just come back from a week-long intensive how-to planned giving conversation. This was literally probably in 2000, so 19 years ago. A week-long intensive plan giving 101 type thing, and I was really excited about all the ways, all the hows a gift could be accomplished, and started talking with her. You know, she expressed what she wanted to do, which is, I want to make a gift to do this, and you know, I'm thinking about using this real estate, and I just went off, got so excited that I was going to be able to use my brand new shiny knowledge with this woman, and literally 5 minutes into the conversation, she looked at me and she said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was pretty much embarrassed and have reflected on that time over and over again in how I was totally inappropriate in going down that road with her, because she didn't care how that gift was done. She was more concerned with what she wanted to do and why she was wanting to do it. So I'm reminded of her and that story so many times, and I try never to do that again. In fact, I try never to speak in technical terms with donors. I'd rather focus on that what and why. But always leave a conversation with ways to follow up. So you're going to want to have in mind the reason why you need to be back in front of them. So perhaps it's getting them information, or perhaps it's you just set the stage right away. Let's get together in 2 weeks to continue this conversation. So always have that in mind when you walk into that meeting, that you're going to have a strategy to get back in front of that person. So what's next? How can we help them proceed in fulfilling their philanthropic goals and objectives? So ask them what can be done to assist them in the process. Do they need information? Do they need a form from us? Do they need us to send them information about something that we've discussed, or do they want us to send it to their advisor? Would they like us to meet with one of their advisors? If they don't have an advisor, I would suggest having a few that you can present to them if they don't have one. I'm constantly surprised at how many of the donors I've worked with, individuals who've owned businesses and have had significant portfolios and have been greater than the millionaire next door, and they do not have the advisors that are needed to take them through the route that we're trying to walk together with. So have a few that you're able to give to them. I don't know that I would recommend one. I tend to say recommend at least 3 and let them choose so they can identify which one they're the most comfortable with. But definitely have some individuals, whether they're estate planning attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors, that you can introduce them to that will help them through this process. Offer to help them in any way that they feel comfortable doing. And I suggest that we be persistent, walk that fine line of not being annoying. So we want to be persistent, but at their own pace. So you can even ask them, how often do you want me to check on you with regards to this? You've told me you're going to do this with regards to your next steps. Can I follow up with you in 3 weeks? Would that be okay? Always be polite. Always be gracious and humble and polite with them. And just know that persistence, when you say, I'm going to follow up with you, that doesn't mean that you need to email them, call them, write them notes, not even weekly or monthly. This could be literally years in the planning. And I can distinctly remember a donor I've worked with at 3 different organizations where I've worked with her to accomplish a simple bequest in her will, and it literally took her about 7 or 8 years to finally say to me, hey, Cathy, guess what? I finally did that. And I had worked with her at 3 different organizations. So sometimes it can take years. And ask directly if you should stop reaching out. So if you call them and you can kind of hear that, oh, I can't believe the dread in their voice, I can't believe she's calling me again, ask them, hey, I know that we've talked about me reaching out to you about this. Would you like me to take a pause and call you back in 6 months? So change up the way you reach out to them, do all the different ways, the email, the call, the text, whatever they're comfortable with, but change it up. And remember, if someone does say to you, I want you to follow up with me, I believe that we have a responsibility as an organization to do so. We have a responsibility to them in this process of fulfilling their objective to see them through it. And if we stop, then we've left them kind of hanging. And as we all know, many donors take a long time to figure out what they want to do. So just remember that if someone does ask you to stop, you need to stop. But until you hear, please stop. I think it's our duty to continue talking with them and visiting with them about these options. So this photo, in my mind, represents happy donors, but it also represents happy development officers. And so my hope is that the questions we reviewed, whether they were about discovering our donors' values and motivations, or whether it was exploring assets that might be giftable to your organization to satisfy those goals, that these have been helpful and that you have some literal good takeaways that you can put in your back pocket that will help you get to know your prospects better. When I first started out in the business, literally felt compelled to review certain types of questions to ease my nerves or apprehension into starting some of those legacy conversations. And it can be hard to talk about planned giving. We think of it as their final act, right? We're talking about death and dying. But at the same time, the reality of it is that we all need to have these conversations with someone in order to be prepared for that time when we are no longer here. So hopefully this slide represents you and your organization when you're working with your donors and helps you share that joy with them. So I've enjoyed this opportunity to share with you the ways that I've discovered more about my donors and the assets that they have. And I hope you have found it enjoyable too. And I am open to questions if there are any.
Great, Cathy, thanks so much. We do have a handful of questions that have come in. I do want to just encourage the people still on the call. We have about 300 people still on the call. If you have a question that hasn't been addressed, go ahead and send that in. Just type it into the question pane and hit send, and Cathy will get to as many as we have time for. So, excuse me, Trey was asking, how do you go about finding out if your donor has an advisor, has an advisor without it being a yes or no question? What's a good way to ask about that?
I wish I could ask Trey a follow-up question to that. I will attempt to answer it. So how do we find out if a donor has an advisor? I think that when we're talking to them, if you're having at some point, I'm guessing they have been a donor to your organization. So you have some gift history with them. So if you want to explore whether or not they have a financial advisor or whether they have an attorney, you can just simply ask them, is there someone that you work with to help you decide the most tax-effective way for you to make a gift? Or I know you're considering leaving us in your estate plans. Do you have someone to visit with about that? Do you have an attorney that you would like to visit with about that? So depending upon which way you're trying to go with identifying what type of advisor, I would try to come at it from that direction. And Trey, if that doesn't answer your question, feel free to email me later.
Great. We have a question from Hal. Hal is asking, besides children, what are the biggest or most common objections or roadblocks that you have encountered that keep people from executing a planned gift?
Outliving their money is the number one objective that I tend to hear when I'm working with someone with regards to getting that gift, getting their estate plan closed or getting their executed documents together. And it's yes, children and grandchildren. However, I think that a lot of individuals really struggle with the concept of better health care having an impact on them living longer. And if they're married, what does that look like for themselves and their spouse? Is there a future of needing some assisted living for one or the other? And outliving their resources tends to be the largest objective that I've seen when it comes to executing documents.
Okay.
That's a great question.
We have a comment. Yeah, we have a comment from Jennifer. She just wanted to thank you. Especially, she really appreciated that you shared your story about how you jumped in right away to the how, and that so many of the people on the call have been there. It was a really good reminder to stick with the what and the why. So she just wanted to thank you for that.
You're welcome, Jennifer. And I will tell you what, that was probably the most sobering moment in my professional career. I was sitting in her living room. So yeah. Anyway, yes. You're welcome, Jennifer.
Okay, so let's see. Mary has a question for you. She asks, how would you handle a financial advisor who is blocking the planning or negating the donor's thoughts? Some advisors are afraid of losing assets or control of their clients.
So that's a legitimate question and a legitimate concern. I will say that not all feel that way. So I know I don't ever want us to singly, categorically put all of our advisors in that group. However, I have experienced it, and I'm sure many of us have. You know, when you're talking to someone about removing a significant piece of how they have their livelihood made, they may choose to redirect their conversation. And so if I have access to that individual, if I have access to the advisor that's hesitant to encourage the donor to make a gift, then I would just share with them. You know, it's my understanding that Christy and Brian really want to make this gift, and how can we together make this happen? And they're going to be so happy when this gift has been made that I know they're going to be grateful to you, they're going to be grateful to us. So how can we make this work? And many times, in my experience, it's been the financial advisor who hasn't wanted to see the gift go out. If it's an outright gift that needs to be made to the organization for capital expenditure or something like that, then that's a little bit different than if it's something that may or may not be going into an endowment or things like that. So you need to kind of identify what the gift is going to fund, but perhaps they have an opportunity to open a donor advised fund there, or perhaps they have an opportunity to do a charitable trust, whether it's a lead or remainder, and that asset could still be, the trust could still be held with that advisor. So I hope that I've answered your question. If you have a specific question that's different from this answer, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay. We do have a couple people that wrote in after you were talking about one of the major obstacles that you face besides children, and they're wondering, so you talked about how outliving their resources or outliving their money is one of the major roadblocks, and they're wondering, so how do you overcome that?
Yep. A great follow-up question that I should have done while I was talking about it, but I'm so glad that they chimed in. So when they have the concern about outliving their resources, you have several different options as a go-to for as a backup if they are charitably inclined. Now, again, we are never in the position to force someone to make a charitable gift. Work with every day. So if you have an individual who is charitably inclined and is afraid that they will outlive their resources, then you can offer, obviously, a deferred gift that will allow them to not release control of the asset until a certain point in time. Typically, it's a testamentary gift, so they've now passed on, and the gift comes to you in the form of a bequest. Another option is, in some cases, a charitable gift annuity or a charitable remainder trust that would provide income for either themselves or spouse or other individuals for their lives or term of years, so they still have some financial security, knowing that some type of income will be coming in, yet they, at the same time, with those charitable trusts, receive that immediate gratification and benefit of making that gift at that time that they set the trust up. So there's lots of different opportunities. Again, we don't want to put somebody in a vulnerable position where they will ultimately regret having made a gift. So again, through these questions, hopefully we've identified that the individuals we're talking with are in a position to make the gift, even if it tends to be deferred because they are a little bit concerned about something. We still have options. Great question.
Okay, and with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We are at the top of the hour, so thank you so much, Cathy, and thank you to everyone who logged in today. If you did have a question that you had for Cathy that we didn't get answered and you'd still like to talk to her about it, she has offered up her email address. You see it there on the screen now, Cathy@thinkgiving.com. If you have any questions about Stelter or the webinar or our products or services, specifically, you can reach out to Jeremy, myself, or you can visit us online at Stelter.com. And finally, one of the questions that came in quite often, I thought I would just tackle this at the end. Will you get the slides? There was a great many wonderful questions that Cathy provided in the slides, and I know you guys all want to get your hands on those. So yes, those will be available along with the recording on our website at Stelter.com/webinars. It takes a couple days to get that posted, so check that out on Monday, or just wait for the email that will come from me in your inbox letting you know when it's available. So thank you again, Cathy. I know you had so many items to juggle today to be here with us, and we really appreciate your time.
I didn't share some of those, but you're welcome.
No, I know.
You're very welcome.
We had
right before we get on, right before we got on this webinar, my fire alarm that's hooked to my security company started going off every 5 minutes. So fortunately, we were able to fix that, and it didn't go off. But yeah, that was funny. Anyway, it was my honor, and I hope I hope folks enjoyed, and I'm happy to help anytime. So feel free to email me.
Great. Thanks, Cathy.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. And we hope to see you next month for our next webinar. Check out stelter.com/webinars and get registered for that. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.